the state and local government fleets portion, and the high priority and federal fleets portion. High priority fleets are large, well-capitalized businesses that are well suited for incorporating ZEVs into their fleet. Fleets with 50 or more vehicles or $50 million or more in annual revenue and federal government fleets are subject to the ZEV upgrade requirements. Affected vehicles include those listed on the right of the slide. High priority fleet's default compliance path is the model year schedule. Under this path, only ZEVs may be added to the California fleet starting January 1 of 2024. Existing combustion vehicles must begin to be removed from the California fleet starting January 1, 2025. These fleets may also use the ZEV milestones option, which we'll cover in a couple of slides. State and local government fleets in California may use the default ZEV purchase schedule. Under this path, half of all annual purchases of affected vehicles must be zero-emission vehicles starting January 1, 2024. This means that half of what a fleet purchases can still be combustion vehicles. Starting January 1, 2027, all purchases must be zero-emission. Entities that are located in designated counties or those with 10 or fewer vehicles may delay starting this requirement until January 1, 2027. Both high priority fleets and state and local government fleets may opt to use the ZEV milestones option. This path phases ZEVs into the California fleet based on percentages in the table and the fleet's makeup over time. This option provides flexibility to manage which vehicles to upgrade to zero-emission vehicles first and to continue adding combustion vehicles to the California fleet as long as the milestones are being met. Now turning to benefits. Widespread electrification of the state's medium and heavy-duty vehicles is expected to result in significant emission reductions in particulate matter from reduced brake wear, oxides of nitrogen, and greenhouse gas emissions. The Advanced Clean Trucks, Advanced Clean Fleets, and heavy-duty omnibus regulations result in substantial emission reductions together. These reductions will be key in meeting the state's 2031 and 2037 ozone attainment goals called for in the state implementation plan and for achieving carbon neutrality by 2045. Next slide. As you can see from this list, there are a dozen different exemptions and extension provisions that address situations where a ZEV might not be available to meet a fleet's needs and to give some flexibility to fleets as they phase in ZEVs over the next decade or two. The table and arrow on the slide highlight the two exemptions we believe are impacted by AB 1594, the ZEV purchase exemption and the daily usage exemption. The ZEV purchase and daily usage exemptions allow a fleet to purchase an internal combustion engine vehicle in case a ZEV is not available or cannot meet the fleet's demonstrated daily usage needs. There are access qualifications for these exemptions. Fleet owners can only apply for these exemptions when replacing a vehicle. And depending on the compliance path selected, there are additional requirements. If using the ZEV purchase schedule for state and local governments, the vehicle being replaced must be at least 13 years old. If using the model year schedule for high priority fleets, the vehicle being replaced must be at least 16 years old or have at least 700,000 miles on it. And if using the ZEV milestones option, there is no age limitation, but all remaining combustion vehicles in the fleet would have to apply for and obtain exemptions because of the flexibility of this option to comply with any vehicle. The primary requirements that AB 1594 would affect are the first two here, for the 13 and 16-year limitations on exemption applications. Next slide. So what is the daily usage exemption? The daily usage exemption covers when a ZEV is available to purchase but cannot meet the demonstrated daily mileage or energy usage needs of the fleet owner. The provision would allow the purchase of a combustion vehicle instead of a ZEV. To qualify, fleet owners must already be at 10% ZEVs to access the provision. It is also not accessible if a fuel cell zero-emission vehicle, a near zero-emission vehicle, or if battery electric vehicles with large batteries are available in the needed configuration. Fleets would need to submit a daily mileage or energy usage report for all other vehicles of that same configuration in their California fleet to show that the capability of existing ZEVs cannot fit at least 90% of the daily usage needs. Next slide. The daily usage report would be a 30-day report including mileage or energy used during each of the 30 days for all vehicles of that same configuration being replaced. Data can be any 30-day period from within the last year or 5 years if the fleet has a mutual aid agreement. In the report, the fleet owner would have to identify the lowest energy or mileage reading from that 30-day report for each day, Then throw out the three highest of those readings that were identified. The purpose of this calculation is to show that an available ZEV with a certain range would not be able to meet at least 90% of the fleet's needs over the period, which is 30 days less the three highest outliers, representing about 90% of the fleet's daily usage needs. AB 1594 would require us to revisit this calculation for traditional utility vehicles used by public agency utility fleets. And we will be discussing this later in the presentation and want to hear your comments and feedback. Next slide. Next, we'll dive into the specifics of the bill and our discussion topics. The definition of public agency utility in the bill is comprised of four distinct entities that are all defined in statute. These include local publicly owned electric utilities as defined in the Public Utility Code, community water systems and wastewater treatment providers as defined in the Health and Safety Code, and water districts as defined in the California Water Code. According to the California Municipal Utilities Association, there are more than 40 local publicly owned electric utilities or POUs in the state. There are over 1,100 wastewater treatment plants throughout California, largely operated by public agencies, though there are also some private systems in place where a publicly owned treatment plant is not feasible. There are also around 3,000 community water systems across the state that deliver water to the public. Most are publicly owned while some are private. We also understand that there are hundreds of water districts in California. We understand that all local publicly owned electric utilities and water districts and most wastewater treatment providers are subject to the state and local government agency fleet requirements and may elect to use the ZEV milestones option. Next slide. Next, the bill was written to apply only to medium and heavy duty traditional utility specialized vehicles. We are interested in feedback for how to define these vehicles. From our understanding, utility vehicles are typically work trucks built on a cabin chassis, typically equipped with power takeoff equipment, and are typically in the class 4 through 8 weight range. We have a definition in the regulation already for specialty vehicle in the high priority fleets portion, which I will read out. A specialty vehicle is a heavy-duty truck and means one of the following: a vehicle with a gross vehicle weight rating greater than 33,000 pounds with a heavy front axle, or a vehicle with a gross vehicle weight rating greater than 33,000 pounds that is not designed to carry cargo and is configured to perform work that can only be done while the vehicle is stationary, and the auxiliary mechanism to perform that work is an integral part of the vehicle design. Examples include vehicles commonly known as vacuum trucks, digger derricks, drilling rigs, and concrete pump trucks. So really what we're looking at is the last half of the second part of that definition. We would like to hear your thoughts on repurposing this definition, or if you think there are other ways to craft this. Next slide. Besides defining a traditional utility specialized vehicle used by a public agency utility fleet, AB 1594 also requires CARB to consult with public agency utilities on other criteria besides model year that can be used to determine when a traditional utility specialized vehicle is at the end of its life. As mentioned earlier, 13 years is used as an eligibility criteria for the daily usage and ZEV purchase exemptions for most public agencies. Establishing this qualifying criteria was necessary to ensure that exemptions were not requested prematurely within the normal useful life of a combustion vehicle, and reduces the likelihood that a fleet owner might purchase a combustion vehicle because it is unavailable as a ZEV. We are seeking feedback on other criteria besides model year that are typically used by public agency utilities when determining their traditional utility specialized vehicle needs to be replaced. Some examples are provided on the slide for discussion purposes, such as odometer readings, usage data, reliability indicators, or others. Last, for the purposes of determining the daily usage of a medium or heavy-duty vehicle, a public agency utility may provide comprehensive usage data for a class of vehicles that does not exclusively rely on the lowest mileage reading and does not exclude the highest usage days. So we'll be using all submitted information in the determination. Next slide. We are interested in hearing your feedback and comments on how to define, again, traditional utility specialized vehicles and the end of useful life criteria that's used by public agency utilities when they need to replace them. This will conclude today's presentation. And if you have any comments or feedback that we did not get to today, please feel free to send them to zevfleet@arb.ca.gov. And I'll now turn this back over to Paul for questions and answers.
Thanks. And so just to reiterate this, we do see this as being the beginning of a dialogue. So AB 1594 has some areas that it is fairly narrow, but there's some areas that we still want some feedback on the appropriate ways to make some of these definitions. So we are looking for feedback from the utilities on what's the best way to achieve this. So we'll now go to Q&A. So I think we'll start with any in-person commenter. So if you have any questions, we have a podium on the left side. If you could line up and go to it. And after that, we can go to any questions from the online people. So. Yeah, it should be green.
Oh, there, it's lit up. Okay, sorry. Hi, Sarah Delorier. I serve as the Director of Air, Climate, and Energy Programs for the California Association of Sanitation Agencies, and we represent more than 90% of the sewer population in California. We do support this whole pursuit in carbon neutrality, as well as AB 1594 and its requirements, and looking at how to implement those into the ACF regulations, and appreciate the opportunity really to provide some input and comment here. Specifically with respect to the definition of a wastewater utility or wastewater treatment provider, you had noted that it does reference section 116773.2 of the Health and Safety Code, where it talks about including wastewater collection, treatment, or disposal service through a POTW. We also just wanted to offer reference to 40 CFR Part 403.3Q, which defines a POTW, and it also includes, here just a second, I have something in the way here, also includes the sewers, pipes, and other conveyances only if they convey to the POTW itself. And so just wanted to offer that as a reference as well for consideration in the definition there.
Do you mind repeating that CFR one more time?
Oh, sure. Let me go back up here. 40 CFR Part 403.3Q.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Also just wanted to address looking at the lifetime requirement for the flexibility provisions. We asked that that be removed, that a vehicle must be 13 or more years old to be eligible for the flexibility provisions. This requirement does compromise the wastewater sector's ability to reliably service our treatment and collection systems. We wanted to mention that the useful life of vehicles is variable. Replacements occur when vehicle reliability and availability of parts are limited. And so based on surveys of public collection system agencies, the useful life of medium and heavy duty vehicles can be 8 to 10 years. Southern California actually does have quite a few vehicles that are CNG, mostly actually CNG fueled vehicles, in order to be responsive to South Coast Air Quality Management District regulations and air quality needs. But in general, vehicles are replaced for reliability purposes. And so before that, reaching that 13-year requirement, they will need to have some servicing or replacement. The 13-year eligibility requirement for replacement will result in those older internal combustion engines with higher emissions to remain on the road longer versus being replaced with newer, lower emitting vehicles. One other area I wanted to mention, and we do have some other folks online who will be commenting, but with respect to expanding the daily usage exemption to consider the number of hours operated for vehicles. Many of our sector's vehicles include or incur low mileage, but a high number of operating hours because they are driven to a site where they must idle to perform their function. And so we would ask that hours be included. I don't know if you have a limit on time, but I want to make sure that others have time, and we do have others who are going to be speaking to other points we have, but can come up later if there's time remaining.
Yeah, that would work.
But thank you.
You have a daily usage.
Any questions?
Yeah, I'll go first. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I guess first, thank you for the comments. And I guess I do appreciate the information on the alternate definition. Do you have any data, or we can follow up about, like, who does that bring in that isn't covered by the current definition? Like, how much of a difference that is? That would be kind of helpful for us to know.
I think it's more ensuring that the wastewater collection system, as well as the treatment and other, are included, so that the actually servicing the collection system with the types of vehicles that relate to this regulation would be included and can be, I guess, eligible for those flexibility provisions.
Okay.
Just
And
further clarification.
yeah, and on that second point, I think we do agree that we will be removing that 13-year criteria that is plain within the bill's text. I think we're seeking feedback on what that should be replaced with. If we can't look at model year, I think you mentioned reliability is the biggest criteria there.
Yeah.
So how should we come up with a metric or for your group, a metric that would kind of put that into statute that we could actually work with? Because we're not going to be using model year, but if something different works, we can look at that too. That'll be more fit in with your needs in the regulation.
Yeah, and so maybe reliability and limitation on parts availability. So maybe that's something that we could survey our folks on and understand from a reliability standpoint. Is it just this 8 to 10 year life that we're seeing happening more consistently, that we need to replace vehicles in that time period? Or is it just more variable than that, that we need to have the flexibility where there's no lifetime provided versus just having data on reliability that's provided? So we could figure out what that reliability criteria.
We can definitely discuss this further. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Okay. And I'll pass on Chris for the hours question.
Yeah, just real fast on the daily usage. So we did already craft the daily usage provision to account for energy use, and that does include an hour opportunity to provide hours of usage for vehicles that are operated while stationary instead of a mileage report. So the reg already does allow for reporting the hours and energy used in lieu of straight mileage based provision. So
okay,
just
I'll
want to
check
make that
that out
clear.
and follow up with our group to see if there's any specifics on that we need to talk to you about.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, CARB staff. My name is Nick Blair. I'm a state relations advocate with the Association of California Water Agencies. We appreciate the opportunity to speak today as this conversation gets underway. AWCA represents over 470 public water agency utilities, and we collectively are responsible for 90% of the water delivered to cities, farms, and businesses in California, and are essential service providers that use specialized trucks during severe weather, wildfire, natural disaster, and physical events to maintain reliable water service throughout California. We appreciate the consideration of how to best converse on this topic with AB 1594. And we think it's appropriate to consider the various traditional utility specialized vehicles that our members employ. We've mentioned these before, but just for the sake of conversation, I'll reiterate some of the vehicles that we have in mind are Hammer, Vector, maintenance, stake trucks with cranes, water filtration, dump trucks, hydro excavators, vacuum trucks, mobile crane trucks, and state bed trucks. Apologies if I doubled on a few of those. In response to the end of useful life criteria, I shared these slides with my members, and so far the input I've gotten is similar to what Sarah was saying, that reliability should be prioritized as a criterion over model year and odometer, and we can try to think of more specifics on that with more time allotted. Another thing I heard was that cost of repairs should be considered if the vehicle is getting increasingly expensive to repair due to habitually breaking down, could be a sign of the end of useful life. And in the same way, as Sarah was mentioning, that might be prioritized over odometer and model year readings, as those may not compare to the wear and tear that some vehicles have over others. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. One question I did have, and I know you've given a response on the past, but can we think of ways to take the lessons learned from this process and think about just at a high level how it works in parallel with the implementation group efforts, just as we are still trying to find the nuance and understanding of where exemptions are appropriate, and just thinking about where the lessons learned here can be applied? And happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And I do agree that we work within the same group, like some of the managers overseeing implementation are in the room. So we're definitely going to tie the two together where we can see where we can take lessons learned from the rulemaking process or the implementation process and put them together. I will, and yeah, that's something we can do, and we can definitely have that conversation.
Absolutely.
And then I will also request, if you wouldn't mind sending that list of vehicle types to Zev Fleet, that would be helpful. I was trying to capture them all, but it was a little quick.
Definitely.
And then for both you and Sarah, as you guys are thinking about like reliability, just thinking about what kind of metrics could we use that would be, equally applicable across a lot of different types of fleets.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Janus Norman. I represent the California Broadband and Video Association. Have some comments that are just slightly beyond the topic, but related. California Broadband represents the leading providers of broadband and high-speed internet applications that connect Californians to their communities and the world. Our members recognize the importance of resource efficiency and the mitigation of potential climate change-related impacts. The advanced fleet or regulations, high priority fleet requirements represent specific and significant concerns regarding our members' ability to provide critical communication services across the state. California experiences significant and regular wildfire incidents, earthquakes, atmospheric rivers that can damage or repair its power grid. Impacts could range from very serious health and safety concerns to violation of contractual obligations around service restoration. Our first concern, the ACF regulation limits emergency operations to declared emergency events. This does not consider upkeep of cable, fiber, and wireless infrastructure that is needed to initiate 911 calls and emergency alerts at all times, not just declared emergencies. Again, Executive Order N7320 recognizes the need to maintain broadband connectivity to support emergency services. Second, the ACF exempts only emergency support vehicles as defined in the California Vehicle Code Section 165 and other public entity transportation services and supplies, which does not include private industry that is working every day to ensure Californians can access essential services and 911 emergencies. We would like to offer for consideration an amendment to Section 2015C within the list of exemptions to the requirements of Sections 2015 through 2025.6 to include bucket trucks. This type of vehicle is used in almost every industry that is needed for aerial work to restore operations and services after an emergency, including electric utilities, telecommunications, construction. All of these use cases are important after an emergency. There is also a practical matter with regard to the electrification of this fleet. There is no electric bucket trucks that meet the specific needs of the internet service providers. Further, many emergencies can correlate with prolonged power outages, which would prohibit the use of electric bucket trucks precisely during the period of time in which they're most needed to restore critical communication services. California's EV charging infrastructure, both the grid and charging locations, are unable to support today's volume of electric vehicles on the road without years of infrastructure investment, development, and deployment. By 2030, about 1.2 million chargers will be needed for 8 million passenger vehicles, according to a state report. Recently, only about 80,000 public chargers have been installed statewide, with another 17,000 on the way, according to state data. The goal is 250 by 2025, and that goal is not ensuring ubiquitous deployment of those charging stations throughout the state. Those restrictions could prevent or limit operation of fleet vehicles and the ability to support our customer connectivity and service level commitments. Reliable and affordable internet broadband service impacts many aspects of life, including economic, workforce development, infrastructure, public safety, education, and so on. While CARB's efforts to develop innovative policies to address climate change and to address the health impacts of air quality are admirable, Cal Broadband is requesting an exemption for our bucket trucks to ensure the operation, maintenance, and resiliency of Californians' modern, next-generation broadband networks in the emergency context, given current technology limitations. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. I guess to respond to some of that, I guess to provide some we're definitely willing to talk and discuss your issues, but to provide some background, our board did approve the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation last April, and a lot of the things we discussed did come up, and we built a number of provisions into rule to help address these. So in the examples you listed where vehicles are not available or can't meet the fleet's needs, The rule has a number of exemptions, such as the ZEV purchase exemption, the daily use exemption, which really addresses cases where the vehicles are not available or can't meet your needs. And the rules phased in over the next 2 decades to ensure that while the technology might not be there now, it can develop over time to meet the needs of the California's fleets. So I think we're willing to discuss this, but the bill itself has a fairly narrow definition, and we can talk about this, but the bill provides some flexibility that we're trying to keep narrow, and just so we can get this forward and keep the regulation as it is to, I guess, as was passed by our board and as the legislature didn't really direct changes in some areas. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other people in the room? If not, we can go to participants on Zoom. So I'll pass to Jill, who will take comments from our online participants.
Thank you. When I call your name, please unmute your mic, state your name and affiliation, and ask your question. David Rothbart, you are now unmuted.
Good morning. This is David Rothbard. I'm representing the Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts. I'm also the Air Quality Committee Chair for Clean Water SoCal, and we represent the wastewater community in Southern California. Specifically, my agency, we serve 5.5 million people in Los Angeles County, and we cover a service area of 850 square miles. So essentially, my agency is an essential public service, and we're responsible for making sure wastewater is treated. You make sure you discharge that water to the requirements for the water board, and essentially we're concerned about how to maintain this infrastructure that's critical. If we don't maintain it properly, the wastewater can actually get out, get exposed to the public, and cause worse problems for the communities. So that's kind of where we're coming from, is we're saying we need reliable services. Unfortunately, today my fleet manager is not here, but she did want me to convey some concerns we have in the 13-year useful life provision. And my agency has been purchasing electric vehicles for some time. We've been ordering Class 8 vehicles. The problem is they're not readily available. The chassis are starting to become available, but actually building these things and getting them together, getting them to be issued and functional is a completely different story. We've had some that are backlogged for 3 years. So it's taking quite some time to do that. And the crux of the matter is the vehicles that we use for this essential public service to keep the community safe, keep them not exposed to wastewater. We need crew transports. We need vehicle control vehicles, traffic control vehicles. We need utility trucks that carry tools to do these services, to maintain our infrastructures, cranes, vacuum trucks, sewer jetters. All these vehicles are necessary as a team to maintain this critical infrastructure to keep that wastewater where it's supposed to go and clean it. But essentially what we're finding is it's something that we need these vehicles to be reliable, and saying 13 years is arbitrary. What we're finding is a lot of these vehicles that when they are unreliable, they have to be replaced. And many of them are before 13 years. We support what Sarah Delorier said from CASA, as far as it could be much sooner than 13 years. 8 to 10 years is very common. And without this change, we're required to buy an electric vehicle when they don't exist, and we're trying to buy them and we can't get them. It is critical to change this 13-year provision to make sure these vehicles are reliable, available, so we could do an essential public service for the public. But I'll stop there and just want to reiterate, we have lots of members that would like to testify today, but because it's a holiday, we don't have that many folks that are available. So we certainly encourage you to have other working group sessions so others could chime in. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you for the comment. We appreciate the feedback, and we can definitely have more follow-up meetings. I do understand that this is spring break, so a lot of our own staff are out on vacation. But yeah, we're definitely able to have more conversations just to kind of nail down some of these. What is a better criteria? What types of vehicles should we be looking at, and all these follow-up questions.
And David, I'll also ask you to send that list of vehicles to Zev Fleet as well. Thank you.
Steve Jepson.
Hi, this is Steve Jepson, Executive Director for Clean Water SoCal. We represent over 80 public water, wastewater agencies in Southern California. Fully support the comments from CASA, Sarah Delorier, and from our Air Quality Chair, David Rothbard. I'll be brief. I think that we really appreciate you having this workshop. We appreciate you understanding that we have some serious public health and safety needs that would be challenging, very challenging to do with battery electric vehicles. So with regard to another metric for replacement time, we did a poll getting ready for our advocacy on behalf of this regulation with regards to the vacuum trucks that were mentioned, the sewer jetter vacuum trucks, also known as combo trucks. They're used in the wastewater sector as one of our most prolific tools for preventive maintenance and emergency response. They're also used in the water sector for emergency repairs and excavation and sinkhole repairs, and they're used in the stormwater section to maintain stormwaters and provide flood response. It's a really crucial workhorse for our sector. So with regards to the age metric for those vehicles, when I polled, I heard 5-year replacement, I heard 8-year replacement, I heard 10-year replacement as the longest. But a more effective way of measuring was runtime, and 4,000 hours of runtime is what I heard, which will equate to 5, 6, or 8 years generally. But what I'd like to say is we would be happy to circulate a survey. We could circulate it through CASA or through Clean Water SoCal, and work with you on specific questions of the types of vehicles and the types of duration and the replacement time, and provide information from the stakeholders on effective replacement. So I'll stop there. You know, I had a lot of comments prepared on the importance of our essential public services and how we have state water board regulations that are increasing the level of service that we need to provide. I won't go into those details, but just want to say we're happy to meet again and get some more detailed response on some of the information you need to adjust the regulation. So thank you for the opportunity to comment today.
Thank you. We'd be happy with, to follow up with you and your members about the best way to get this type of data, because we would really appreciate having that type, having that to support the rulemaking effort.
Right, next is Elizabeth DeJong.
Hello, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. As was just said, my name is Elizabeth DeJong. I am the Government Affairs Manager for Southern California Public Power Authority, or SCAPA, a not-for-profit joint powers agency that represents 12 publicly owned electric utilities in Southern California. So my question to CARB, or questions rather, would be what is the process that you foresee for this upcoming rulemaking? And would you please share expectations, specifically timing for submitting written responses for this workshop, as well as what you might see in your future for future workshops or conversations, so that we can prepare to engage in those. So as many of you CARB staff know, this is an important matter for SCAPA's members. We appreciate the workshop and the questions that you've put onto the slides here, and we want to be sure that we work with our members to represent them in our answers. Additionally, I ask that CARB staff share draft regulatory language with the sponsors of AB 1594 for review prior to publishing and kicking off the formal rulemaking, so that we can ensure that we work together to shape a workable outcome. Thank you. I'm happy to restate those questions if it's helpful.
I think I got most of that. So first, thank you for the feedback. In terms of the process for submitting written responses, so the Zev Fleet email is probably the best place that we can keep all this together. In terms of timelines, I don't think we have anything specific in mind. I guess end a month from now might, so let's just say end of April. But all this is really, we want to hear the best feedback so that takes some time, that's also acceptable, but just getting the right information, whether it's through speaking with members, having survey information, just listening, just try to get the best information. We are planning, I think we do have a general expectation of more future workshops. I think as you mentioned, we do intend to at some future event to share draft regulatory text so we can get some feedback from the public. So we do intend to do that before putting out a final proposal. And yeah, so we do want to be open about this and try to make sure we can put the best proposal out there possible. So we will work to achieve that.
And so one clarifying question then is, as far as rulemaking, do you have an intended timeline for kicking off and finalizing the rulemaking?
We're still working on developing our timeline. The rulemaking process as a whole takes time to make sure we can fulfill all the requirements of the Administrative Procedures Act as well as other requirements on us. So this will probably take us into sometime in 2025, but in the meantime, we are looking at ways we can attempt to speed up the process, whether it's through some limited Section 100 changes or other ways we can try to implement parts of the bill earlier than the full rulemaking process would take.
Great, thank you very much.
Mark Bayer, you are unmuted.
Good morning, Mark Baer with Altec Industries. We're a prominent manufacturer of truck-mounted utility equipment, the power company bucket trucks. And just to note about the application that's emphasized, trucks don't necessarily drive around all day, but they do sit at job sites, neighborhoods and such for a lot more than half the day on average. Products in the industry, like our own job site energy management system, really the industry term is an ePTO. So these systems plug in at night and are automated to when the vehicle's in park, it shuts off. All of the job site features are then electrified. So we have not a vehicle sitting around and idling all day, but engine is off, plugged in at night. The ePTO category is a bit of an oddity in that no actual vehicle propulsion. And of course, utilities have driven this industry segment for about a dozen years or more, recognizing that the vehicles don't drive around all day. So putting a lot of money and effort into the driveline when it doesn't really drive around much, focusing on the job site. So my point about this is there will be many applications within municipal utilities where an exception for all the reasons mentioned is appropriate. There is no real NZEV within the product category. So the ePTO is a great feature, emissions and do all the right things. Not sure how to carve out a bullet point within the regulation showing favoritism to applications for exemptions, based on an ePTO with an ICE engine. But just wanted to make a note there. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. So we're definitely happy to discuss further. We had a number of comments during our rulemaking process about ePTOs and whether they should be considered within the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation, and ultimately the board decided to leave them out of the rule. So that's how the rule is right now. So we can think about how to fit that in, but definitely appreciate the comment. Thank you.
Heidi Oriole, you can unmute and ask your question.
Good morning. My name is Heidi Oriole, and I'm a senior civil engineer representing the Sacramento Area Sewer District. Sac Sewer provides sewage collection and treatment services for 1.6 million people in the Sacramento region. We have 5,000 miles of sewer pipe, 117 pump stations, and a large central treatment plant that operates 24/7 every day of the year to protect human health and the environment, while we also produce renewable energy, treated biosolids, and recycled water. We're members of California Association of Sanitation Agencies, CASA, and we support CASA's comments today. As a representative of the wastewater sector, Sac Sewer strongly supports the implementation of the AB 1594 requirements, and we appreciate the opportunity that you're giving us today to provide input and discussion on those revisions. Specifically, we are hoping that you will address the need for vehicle reliability and our sector's need to both respond to emergencies and perform preventative measures. As you've indicated, we are hoping that you revise the 13-year useful life provision, and we are encouraged by your interest in seeking data from our members and our sectors to help with that ability. I want to emphasize the need for public sewer systems to maintain a high level of maintenance. That's necessitated by the need to protect public health and the environment. When our sewer systems don't work, that creates great risk to both of those. And we have very specific state and federal regulations that mandate how we need to respond to sewer systems and maintain them. And the current ACF regulations would diminish our capability to provide that high level of response and maintain the essential public services. So we are eager to implement these revisions promptly. Most of our vehicles are critical response vehicles, and they work together as a team, as David Rothbart mentioned. They all have to be ready and fueled at the end of every shift so that they're able to immediately respond to critical events before a critical sewer event becomes a broader public safety emergency. So if any of our vehicles required for the maintenance of our wastewater systems or ability to respond to emergencies become unreliable, regardless of their age, they need to be replaced as quickly as possible. So we look forward to further engagement on how to define that replacement window. Thank you for the opportunity to comment and your efforts to work with our industries to revise the regulatory language and support our essential public services.
Thank you for the comment.
All right, next is Damon Wyckoff. Please unmute and ask your question. Damon, are you still there? Doesn't look like it. We will move on to John Costatino.
Hello, good morning. John Costantino on behalf of the California Council for Environmental and Economic Balance. And first of all, thank you for having the hybrid format. Really wanted to be there in person today, but due to the week schedule, it's hard for me to leave the dogs when no one else is around. So I encourage you to keep having them in person. It is a benefit. Also appreciate the slides being posted. I can provide some initial thoughts today, but we will, as a group, discuss these over the next week or so and certainly prepare written comments. As far as end of life discussion, safety, reliability has been mentioned. I will note that this issue was front and center during the rulemaking adoption, and SEEB, as well as SCAPA and others that I remember, prepared significant comments on this issue. So I would encourage you to go back to the original set of documents that were submitted and look, because there's a lot of information that's already been presented on this. And then there was a question I had. Are you guys looking for a replacement to the 13 years, meaning number of hours, something hard and fast? Or are you open to the idea that utilities who have run their fleets for many years and have standard operating procedures for when they believe the vehicle should be replaced, could that be something that gets submitted and then each utility has to function by the set of rules that dictate their utility, whether they're near the ocean, whether they're in the mountains, right? There's different levels for each. And so the one size fits all is certainly something that folks have had an issue with the whole time. And so want to throw that out there, that maybe it's it's a standard metric, but it's based on the type of utility, the type of use, the type of terrain and location you're at. And then finally, I want to second Elizabeth from SCAPA's comments about process. I would love to see all these emails posted. Maybe there's a way to do that, because the idea that CASA or SCAPA or SEEB are going to say something interesting that other people would want to read, I think is very high. And if they're submitted to the ZEV fleets and no one else gets to see them, it doesn't feel like a transparent docket. So those are my main points at this point, but we'll certainly get back to you with written comments. And I'll stay on the line in case there's any back and forth. Thank you.
Thank you. On your first comment regarding looking for a replacement for each utility, I think we agree that a one-size-fits-all process might not make the most sense. So I think we're open to hearing like what the best process would be, and just open to feedback. I think that you have your own ideas, we have ideas. Just figuring out what the best process is going forward. As far as having someone look at all the emails, I think we can think about that. I don't know if we have a response for that at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Frank Harris, please unmute and ask your question.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I presume you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Great. My name is Frank Harris. I'm with the California Municipal Utilities Association. CMUA represents publicly owned, not-for-profit electric utilities, water agencies, and wastewater agencies throughout the state. I wanted to offer a couple of observations and kind of want to pile on a few prior comments. I wanted to first support the procedural comments offered by Elizabeth DeYoung, the SCAPA, and John Costantino with SEEB regarding the ability to review submitted comments. So I encourage CARB staff to look at how they can possibly facilitate that. Further, Mr. Costantino mentioned the idea of one size does not fit all. And this is something that is key to my membership. California's publicly owned electric utilities, public water and wastewater agencies are characterized by their diversity, both in terms of size and economics, as well as geographic diversity and weather exposure. And so we will put this in our comments, but written comments, I should say, but I encourage CARB to incorporate and consider that diversity, that how long a perhaps nearly identical vehicle is retained by one agency may not be a good indicator of how long it can be safely retained by another. And as such, I think that diversity is really, really paramount, important to be considered in this process. And then the final thing I wanted to mention right here has to do with further with the diversity, just to give a slight example of this. As others have mentioned already, that it's likely and typical for these trucks to spend a certain amount of time moving and then a certain amount of time sitting stationary at the job site where they are still using energy. To give an example, I have members whose engine hours would possibly be 70% while moving and 30% while being stationary, and others for whom that ratio is completely reversed. And so this further addresses the need to look at the diversity of the fleets and establish a process that can help recognize that. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today. Oh, and one other thing, as Mr. Costantino mentioned, we too absolutely support this hybrid, and thank you for holding the hybrid. I had an intention of being there in person today. I had a family issue. I had to be called out of town. Nonetheless, having this hybrid approach is very, very helpful. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the comments, Frank, and look forward to working with you as we try to implement the bill.
Mark Roast, you can unmute and ask your question.
Okay, it worked. Great. Mark Roost with Sustainable Energy, Inc. and advising Silicon Valley Clean Cities Coalition. The one thing I noticed while we were during the discussion was about EPTOs needing to be charged. If you have a battery electric vehicle, then and the battery is adequate, then the battery of for the drivetrain can power the EPTO or power it continuously without a separate battery pack, whichever works. My main point is that there are now probably 3 different providers, maybe more, of conversion equipment to convert vehicles from fossil fuels to full battery electric. And I know one of them, and we are also, as a company, preparing to be able to enter that market as well. And what the batteries available today are mostly in the 120 to 250 or 300 watt-hour per kilogram range, but there are now 400 watt-hour per kilogram batteries for sale in the United States, including one by a U.S. company, which will be opening a factory in the next year in the United States. And that means that you probably get double the range and time of the batteries that are being used today most frequently. And then we're expecting to increase that to 1,000 to 2,000 watt-hours per kilogram within a year or two. And that will mean, will also with long life. So that would mean that there is no reason not to convert and also with solar canopies, so we're also working on solar, doubling the current efficiency, which would mean that by putting rooftop and canopy over parking driveways, fleets will be able to get enough electricity directly on the spot, on site, to do most of their charging and only rely on the grid when it's necessary, when the weather's bad or whatever. So that's meaning that you can actually economically, when the engine starts to need repairs, rather than replacing a vehicle that probably has a very sound frame and equipment, that you can simply do a retrofit where we take out the engine and put in a battery electric system. And that there's 2 versions of that. One is to leave the drivetrain in place, from transmission on in place and work through it. But there's also a wheel motor version, which we expect to make possible with ample torque and power. And so I'd like to see the regulations allow and support financially where support is being provided to allow utilities, public and private, to plan on switching to battery electric when it becomes economical to do so, which I expect will be several years before the end of life would happen, because we're saving on maintenance, we're saving on fuel, we're saving on not having to do overhauls, not having to do engine replacements or replace vehicles. So that's the main idea.
Thank you for the comment. And I'll also add that the rule does allow for a conversion to be counted as a ZEV if fleet chooses to do so. So that is an option available to fleets. Thank you. Okay, we can go to our next commenter, Jill.
Raul Fleitas. Sorry, you may unmute and ask your question.
Good morning. My name is Raul Fleitas. I'm from Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, Fleet and Aviation Services. I'd like to add the comment too, which most have already stated regarding vehicle life cycle replacements. We would be open to participate and share the data and the metrics that we use for that. That metric is actually very nuanced. There's a lot of different factors that go into when we're doing that replacement cycle, not just straight on year or model. We take into account the engine hours, the body types, and the conditions that they are. Some of our equipment traverses multiple states, and although the mileage might not be there, but the unit itself, the body condition is such that it fails, and there's issues with it. Manufacturers aren't supporting major components like that for the duration of a life cycle of a normal vehicle, so we have to make changes to it. Which other people have commented also, parts availability is a very big issue. A lot of the, due to the economic downturn, there's been a lot of transitioning to having availability of equipment and parts for new equipment, not so much for older. And as such, the aftermarket market hasn't picked up on those things. So we have to make changes into our fleet type based on availability of parts from either OEMs or aftermarkets, as well as changes to model years so we may determine that a vehicle may need to replace sooner due to changes in the model configurations that the OEMs, original manufacturers, are making, and then make those changes. As well as sometimes regulations that are outside of this office, but say Cal OSHA, worker safety that has to be incorporated into our vehicles that wasn't accounted for prior to when that model year was purchased. So along with that, and engine hours, there's a huge amount of multitude of things depending on what we're doing is how we make our determination. And I would like to share, if needed, there was a question regarding what is a utility vehicle. We can share our matrix of the variety of different utility equipment, what we consider them. And I don't know if it would be helpful if you needed pictures of that, but we would offer that. Thank you.
Thank you. We definitely appreciate any information we have on what these vehicles are, and pictures are very helpful, so we definitely appreciate that. Going back to one of your comments on OSHA standards, so the regulation does, our ZEV purchase exemption does have in place, to my understanding, that if you can identify a specific safety issue that the replacement ZEV would not be able to meet, you would be able to qualify for an exemption and purchase a combustion vehicle in that instance. So in those cases, those pop up, you would qualify. I think we expect broadly that ZEVs will be able to meet the same standards, but there is a provision in place to help address that.
Appreciate that.
Christian Corby, you can unmute and ask your question.
Thank you. My name is Christian Corby, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director at the California Electric Transportation Coalition, or CalETC. And I don't have any questions right now, but just wanted to voice my support for the comments from SCAPA and CMUA, especially around the transparency on the docket issue. It's really useful for all stakeholders to see what different good ideas people are recommending. So definitely support that. Also, I'm very interested in the reliability metrics. It seems like that could be a really good way for the rule to incorporate that wide variety of different utilities and different agencies across the state, as CMUA noted. So yeah, just and also wanted to thank CARB staff for their hard work on this. This is a kind of a tough rule provision to implement, so really appreciate your work on it. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment.
Paul, that is the last comment for now. Oh, I see his hand up now. It kept going in and out. So Damon, you may unmute and ask your question.
Thank you, guys. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, great. Appreciate it. So I just wanted to talk about, excuse me, AB 1594 and kind of back to the water and wastewater consideration. I think one thing as we look to implement the rule overall is whether or not there's an opportunity for short-term exemption requests for vehicles that are not necessarily considered proprietary or discipline specific for the water and wastewater industry. That would somewhat allow us to bridge the gap between where we are now and where we need to be with the Clean Fleets rule overall. So I think as the implementation trigs start to work towards full implementation and we consider the AB 1594, perhaps there's an acknowledgement of localized emergencies. I think the last thing any of us want is wastewater pouring out in the city streets or flooding. And so if there's an opportunity to use an ICE vehicle to address an issue in a situation such as that, perhaps there's a way that the CARB can consider some sort of short-term exemption or some sort of a consideration within the implementation that would allow that to happen. And that's—
Thanks, Damon. Real fast, what's your affiliation?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm with the Calaveras County Water District. So we're a rural, low population county water and wastewater special district up in the Sierra Nevada foothills. So we're looking towards 2027, right? And so many of the folks up here in the foothills, particularly those served by the Mountain Counties Water Resources Association, don't have a single charging station currently. So as we look to towards implementation of the entire infrastructure for to accommodate the CARB's Clean Fleets rule, we've got kind of a timeline crunch already. So 3 years is a really short time to have effective charging stations in a county our size, in a service area our size. So I think the one thing that we all focus on, in the operations department is effectively responding to emergencies. And so how we can work through the accommodations of 1594 and also work to see this rule move forward effectively, particularly for the rural folks, I think is where my mind is here with this exemption request.
Thank you. So as basically right now, we have to implement the Advanced Clean Fleets rule as written until the regulation has gone through its full public amendment rulemaking process. That's my understanding of how that works currently. We are, as Paul mentioned, looking at how we can implement some changes that the bill requires a little earlier, if possible. But right now, we don't have any guarantees on that. And so we wouldn't be able to look at other exemption processes outside of what the regulation already has and what AB 1594 is requiring of us. So just wanted to address that. I also wanted to address, you mentioned the ability to use combustion vehicles. If you are a public fleet, you can use your existing combustion vehicles under the ZEV purchase schedule as much as you want until the end of their life. And that end of life is determined by you. The ZEV purchase schedule only requires when you are purchasing vehicles that they must be zero emission. So it doesn't require you to turn over any of your existing vehicles in your fleet. So you should be able to serve those emergencies in this near-term timeframe with your existing combustion vehicles while we work through the rule amendment process.
Thanks.
A few more questions have come in. We're going to move to Sam Wilson. You can unmute, share your affiliation, and ask your question.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hey, so this is Sam Wilson, Senior Vehicles Analyst with Union of Concerned Scientists. Thanks so much for having this workshop today. So yeah, just more observations and comments from me. So ACF included comprehensive exemptions and extensions, as well as multiple compliance pathways. And these were developed over many months in consultation with diverse stakeholder groups. And we certainly appreciate that. We should be clear that the rule as it stands doesn't require any entity to purchase ineffective or non-existent vehicles, as mentioned earlier. And I would suggest just to kind of move past this, that as a part of this rulemaking, CARB consider publishing a list of utility vehicles that are already exempt from ACF, such as those with 2 engines or certain emergency vehicles. I think it would really help ground the conversation in fact. We would also request that CARB staff keep the primary reasons for this unanimously adopted rule at the forefront and limit the scope of the rulemaking to that of 1594 to ensure that the rule's climate, air quality, and economic benefits remain as robust as possible. And then finally, just given the rather esoteric nature of the rulemaking, we would request that CARB publish clear and publicly accessible estimates of potential changes to the rules, climate, air quality, and economic benefits, maybe even ahead of what's required in the APA, so that impacted communities can participate meaningfully in this rulemaking. That's it for now, and thanks again for holding the workshop.
Thank you for the comment. I think we do agree that our board adopted the ACF regulation last year through a unanimous vote. And this bill, which was passed by legislature, we are aiming to implement it, but keep focusing on what the bill says and not all the other stuff in ACF. So this bill is focused on some small portions of it, but the rest of the regulation will stay as is written. So we do agree with that comment. And I think we'll think through the rest of the comments here about the publishing the list and the estimates of the benefits, because we still have to go through the process of figuring out how many vehicles we're talking about and what the potential emissions impact may or may not be. So that'll be a part of the process that we still have to work through.
Great, thank you. We will move on to Richard Miller. You may unmute and ask your question.
Hi, as stated, I'm Richard Miller. I'm the fleet manager for the County of Riverside Transportation Department. And what I've noticed in this bill is it kind of avoids kind of the counties. We are not a public utility, but we support everybody else's public utilities. We support cities and other counties. We're 2,100 square miles. And for the gentleman previous was talking before, a couple people ago, about the rural. We go all the way out through the desert. We go in very small, undeveloped kind of areas, and we have to support that. And our vehicles at any given day could go 200-300 miles. Our utility, we have utility bucket trucks because we do signal repairs, and those can be in the middle of the night, get called out. And their idle times, you've had other people talk about your idle times, where your bucket trucks, you might be low miles, but your engine hours, if you converted them over, the truck would have 500,000 miles on it. So being with the counties, and I know there's other ones that are people out there, we don't fall into a lot of where the exemptions are, but we have those vehicles also. So I was wondering how that can be addressed with this to help, because we are a public service. We support, like I said, everybody. And we maintain the roads. We do a lot of other things, storm damage. So we don't know when there's going to be emergencies. So we have to have the vehicles ready at all times. You just made a comment a couple patrons ago on that you can use your existing vehicles, but those vehicles are also getting worn out and need to be replaced. And if we can't replace them with the internal combustion engines, they're not available right now. A lot of our equipment is not available. So I'm just wanted to throw those comments out there. Not as much of a question on, I just want to make statements resorting to counties.
Thanks for the comment. I think one thing that would help us better understand this issue is the rule does have a number of exemptions in place where, for example, you mentioned the 300 miles for your bucket trucks. We have the daily use exemption that if you can show that your vehicles are traveling 300 miles and what's available on the market can't meet that, we will allow you to purchase a combustion powered vehicle through the exemption process. So we have built in a number of different provisions to help address these situations. So I think understanding like what else is needed will be helpful, because I think you're right that the bill is kind of specific in who it does and does not cover. So trying to go beyond that, we would need to figure out, are we expanding the scope too much? Or is that going to cause unforeseen consequences? So that's kind of what we need to have a better sense of, like, what does the rule have and what to change if we were to make to look at people in your situation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next is Stephen Poncelet. You may unmute and ask your question.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Stephen Poncelet. I'm with Truckee Donner Public Utility District. We operate an electric and water utility in the High Sierra. A couple comments I wanted to make. When it comes to end of life, it's really depends. Our vehicles are off-road. They operate in a harsh environment. Our service territory is 4 by 10 miles. They don't put a lot of miles, but they put thousands of hours doing work in the field. And so as CARB staff, tries to address AB 1594 and the reason why, it was critical that that law get passed, is that our vehicles that do work that respond to storms like the blizzard we just had are out in the field for days. And they do work in the field. Getting there is part of the problem, but then once you're there, you stay for long times, you rotate crews. And so the daily use exemption throughout the development of the regulation was presented as, oh, that's where we'll address work for vehicles rather than range in miles. However, we plan for the worst environment, the worst situation in a 10-year period. So eliminating the top 3 for any vehicle that maintains critical infrastructure or which does work in the field and helps with emergency response is completely a non-starter, for electric and water utilities and wastewater utilities and others. But I understand that's what the regulation has. So my request is that you consider that. And when you develop criteria, understand that, these are very important pieces of equipment that do work for our community, and we need them to be able to do it for extended periods of time in the field. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. And I think, so the bill is fairly specific that we will not be dropping the 3 reading. So I think for that portion, that will be essentially for these public utility fleets removed from the reg text. So that I think is fairly clear, and we do plan to implement it as such.
Any replacement for that though?
And I think we would, yeah. So on the slide, we have displayed the current process for calculating the daily usage. So as you can see, as written, the bill would essentially remove some of the final steps. So we are open to different ways to calculate this daily use exemption if needed for utilities, or just feedback on how this should be done, since the current way is not going to, we will be changing and removing these under the amendments.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I do hope that you work closely with my colleagues from NCPA, SCAPA, and CMUA. They represent 50 public power electric utilities and hundreds of water utilities, and Aqua as well, with Nick Blair. So please work with them. They have a lot of experience.
Will do.
Thank you, Stephen. Next, Mark Royst.
Hello, this is Mark Roos with Sustainable Energy, Inc. and advising the Silicon Valley Clean Cities Coalition again. And I'd like to ask that you support, and there's a reason for it, support startups doing conversion enabling technology, such as battery development and solar panel development, so that the nascent conversion industry can preempt the need for all these exemptions. So I see that a lot of the exemptions have to do with delays in availability of energy, like utility grid slowness, and others have to do with the availability of vehicles that have all of the features needed for these very specific uses. And so the sooner that companies like us are able to get funded and develop the things and finish developing the things we've been developing for a long time, the sooner the industry will be able to have an economical and easy to install system that they can use to be able to generate the energy on site and do the work they need to do without waiting for OEMs who maybe can't afford to do a small population, a small market level specialty truck. And it also will help the company that spoke that said that they provide they provide the various equipment installations, it would make them, they could then work with a conversion company to get the truck fully repowered so that then the main battery can provide the electricity for the electric power takeoff stuff. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment.
Susie Berlin, you can unmute and ask your question.
Hi, good afternoon, or still morning, sorry. Susie Berlin on behalf of the Northern California Power Agency. I would like to express support for the comments made by my colleagues at SCAPA and CMUA and the other public agencies. And I don't want to repeat all those important points. Would like you to just keep those in mind. But I would like to underscore the importance of ensuring that the provisions of AB 1594 are implemented as soon as possible. We understand the need to go through the proper rulemaking process, but we also believe that it is important for this rulemaking to take on this critical issue sooner rather than later and not have any undue delays so that the provisions can be implemented, because as it stands now, there are significant impediments, as you've heard from a lot of public agencies, to the way the existing regulation is going to be implemented and enforced. And we want to ensure that those do not keep us from complying or compromising our essential public services that we're providing. So I'd like to just underscore the importance of moving as quickly as possible to get this rule implemented into formal regulatory changes. Thank you.
Thank you. And we understand that this is a pretty high level issue for a lot of the utilities you've spoken to. So we are working to try to see what we can do quickly and how we can expedite the overall process.
Thank you.
Moving on to Tim Powers, you may unmute and ask your question.
Hello, my name is Tim Powers. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent, excellent. I'm from the Cayugas Municipal Water District. We are a wholesale purveyor of water to 3/4 of the population in Ventura County. I have a question. First, I want to thank the CARB for having this workshop, and I'm glad that it's a priority to address these issues for public agencies, and I appreciate the input from other public agencies today. And I do also support the comments about transparency and how we can all learn from each other's comments in this rulemaking process. One of the issues I have, or one of the questions I have, I'd like an answer from CARB would be, in the daily use exemption, one of the requirements is that at least 10% of the fleet must meet ZEV, or must be ZEV basically, in order to qualify for the exemption. So can I get an explanation on that? Why is that a requirement? And is that something that is in consideration of being removed as part of this process?
Yeah, I can take that. Primarily, this is addressed in our final statement of reasons. We did address this multiple times throughout the rulemaking process, but generally the 10% requirement is to ensure that fleets are actually attempting to move towards ZEVs before asking for exemptions to purchase combustion vehicles. The purpose of the regulation is to reduce emissions from this sector overall, and we felt, and the board agreed, that requiring a fleet to get to 10% zero emissions first before asking for a range or usage case-based exemption would show due diligence for the fleets to attempt to incorporate ZEVs into their fleets by changing how they manage their California fleet. And right now, that is not in the scope of the 1594 changes.
Yeah, on that last portion, the bill is specific about, I guess, two areas where we're looking at changes. One is on the requirements on the end of life. So that's the 13 years that we're looking to revise. And also in the daily use exemption on how to calculate daily usage and dropping certain readings. So we do plan to make changes in those areas. The bill did not specify any changes to the 10% requirement Chris mentioned. So our current intent is to keep that as written. Okay, I don't think we have any more hands online.
Nope, I was just waiting to see if Tim was
Oh,
going to.
oh.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no
go
other
for it.
questions online.
Okay, we can go back to in person then.
Just one more. This is Sarah Delorier with CASA. And I guess building upon that last comment, we did have some information that we had collected with respect to trying to, implement ZEVs into your fleet. And that some are simply not available still, even though there have been purchases by some of our Southern California members over the last 2 to 3 years. And they're not delivered due to the vehicles failing road tests. And that's related to electrical and other unidentified issues, but they're performing beta tests right now in effort to resolve those issues. But if there's a requirement for 10% of your fleet to be ZEV, but you're trying to, and these vehicles are failing the road tests, then where do they lie with respect to eligibility? Is it as long as they purchased or tried to make the purchase?
So for the daily usage exemption, it does require that 10% of the California fleet are zero emission vehicles. So if you made the purchase and are testing it yourselves, then that would be considered part of your fleet. If you haven't bought the vehicle yet and somebody else is testing them, like manufacturers, that would not be considered part of your fleet. So the 10% is based on the California fleet makeup.
Got it. So this is purchased, but the folks who are providing them are doing their road tests before they deliver them. So there's a little bit of disconnect there. Maybe we could talk about more of the detail around that later. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Evan Edgar. I'm the engineer for Edgar Associates. I represent independent private fleets out in Southern Northern California and a lot of public sector refuse fleets. So I'm the refuse guy. I got a statement and I got some questions. First of all, on my statement is that we're keeping a close eye on it. We'd like to have transparent record because next year we're probably going to sponsor a bill to exempt the refuse fleet in the same manner you're doing today. So we're going to keep a close eye so that when we do write the legislation next year, we'll be able to kind of keep a close eye on how it's going to roll out and be implemented. We're essential public service like wastewater, and you got to pick up trash. So I'm not going to repeat all the reasons why we're essential public service and why we need to have reliability. But what we see out there right now is that when it comes to the refuse fleet, we look at duty cycle. These batteries weigh over 4 tons. Our trucks carry 8 to 10 tons. We're losing our duty cycle. So when it comes to being essential public services, not only is the trucks of today are, half the payload, but twice the cost. It'd be a 4 times rate shock factor for the refuse industry. And we got to provide essential public service. So that's my statement. With regards to my question, can you go to slide number 9 about the greenhouse gas emissions drop 45% by 2040? So on this slide, it's with regards to, that might be for the entire fleet industry, but for the refuse, I'm going to recreate this chart. I'll be asking for data to back up this chart. The refuse fleets in California is about 15 to 16,000 for class 7, class 8. About half of their fleet is on carbon negative fuel a day, which averages between minus 50 to minus 75 grams of CO2 per megajoule. The other half is on renewable diesel. We had hoped to put all our fleets on RNG by 2030 and be 100% carbon negative by 2030. But because of the Advanced Clean Fleet rule, we stopped doing that. Making RNG and using it for the trucks has really chilled the industry a lot. Instead, our industry pivoted to renewable diesel. And what we've seen with renewable diesel flood in the market, the RIN values and the whole upset the market because renewable diesel has taken its place. The average carbon intensity for renewable diesel being brought in California by industry about plus 45. So you take our fleet, half is plus 45, the other half is minus 75. Today we're carbon negative. This chart on page 9 here really misrepresents what the refuse fleet's doing today. Not a pipe dream of tomorrow where you don't want to be zero emissions by 2045. That's a pipe dream. Instead, we're doing it today. We're doing it today. We're carbon negative today. So what I like to do is produce this chart that shows that what will happen by pivoting towards Advanced Clean Fleet rule, I'll be presenting a paper to the CARB board in about 2 months by Ricardo and Associates. And Ricardo Associates has been implementing the European Battery Directive for the last 2 years. I was adopted 2 years ago, whereby you have to have a third-party verification of carbon intensity for ZEV heavy-duty batteries. You got to have source control from due diligence that you're not, have blood batteries from the Congo. And you got to have battery recycling next door to the battery recycling workshop. So Ricardo is going to be presenting a report that shows that the life cycle for ZEV batteries probably about plus 75. So by playing out this chart, you are asking the refuse industry that is carbon negative today, in order to increase our greenhouse gas intensity from being carbon negative to plus 75. So we're actually doing the opposite direction. It's a fallacy. So that's why we're going to be sponsoring legislation next year with this data. It give CARB staff a year to work out some issues here, and we'll keep a track on it, but we're going to opposite direction. We had a lot of say during the Advanced Clean Fleet Rule. You heard us time and time again. We're not going away. We have huge investments in RNG. We're carbon negative today, be carbon negative tomorrow, and we'll be keeping an eye on this with a transparent record to have comments to craft legislation next year that will work for the refuse industry. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else in the room would like to comment? Otherwise, we can go back to the comments online. All right, take it away, Jill.
Right, online we have Bobby Joe Shavaria. You may unmute and ask your question.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Bobby Joe Chavaria. I am calling with the Sierra Club Clean Transportation for All campaign. And I just wanted to emphasize as this was being developed, many folks from the environmental justice community supported the legislation and remain in the rule and remain in support of the implementation. One of the key points about this landmark clean transportation rule is that it is technically feasible as it was proposed, offering several compliance pathways to choose from, as well as exemptions and extensions that you all are highlighting today. The rule is a step towards equitable access. And of course, as we talk about low-income communities and communities of color that shoulder the biggest burden of deadly diesel truck pollution, having suffered generations of systemic marginalization, it's important that we understand that our trucks and buses in California have made our air some of the most polluted in the nation. And so we really appreciate CARB putting forward what is required to do to implement this, but also to really understand the sources of the smog forming pollution in California, emitting nearly 40% of the state's deadly diesel soot. And so one aspect I think that we want to emphasize is especially while industry and specific industries in particular, like with our public utilities, these are the vehicles that are in our communities on a daily basis. And as many have mentioned, have significant runtime in terms of while they're perhaps performing maintenance or significant repairs, that they need to be as clean as possible. And we do want to emphasize that this transition needs to, as quickly as possible, get to those ZEV trucks, especially to cut the pollution in vulnerable communities. And we know that available technologies will continue to expand to meet the diverse industry needs across the state. And so not relying on and sort of the false solutions of necessarily zero carbon, net zero carbon, or even negative carbon, especially as we also face the other emissions like NOx and excuse me, and greenhouse gas, other greenhouse gas emissions that are still polluting our communities. And so just wanted to emphasize the pollution-free technologies that fleets will and truck owners will need to invest in, but also save money over the life of the use of these vehicles. And so really just rely on implementation of things that have passed, not and emphasize not to resist the technology that is in place, and just wondering if if there's any complementary infrastructure that is being offered to, especially the public utilities, or if there's any resources for the testing through this rule and through the implementation process. Thank you.
Thank you. So on the last comment about complementary infrastructure, so we have a separate group focused on infrastructure implementation in our truck regulation implementation groups. We have one focused solely on that topic. We can definitely get you in touch. We are aware there's a lot of work going on infrastructure, both from our sister agencies who are doing a lot of planning and streamlining to help get that pushed out, as well as by private parties and public entities as well. So a lot is there. We can help get you in contact with those folks because they're more knowledgeable about what's happening on the ground than we are at the moment.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dave Bowen, you can unmute and ask your question.
Yes, my name is David Boland. I have a statement and a question. I represent the California Water Association, which is the utilities that are private water companies that are regulated by the CPUC and are also regulated under other California water supplier regulations. And CWA members are also included in this particular exemption, even though they aren't public agencies, because they are community water suppliers. I just wanted to make sure that the CARB staff understood the fact that our companies are going to be having many of the same issues and be working very closely with the rest of the water agencies, particularly the comments that Aqua made, the comments that CMUA made, and also many of the same issues that are expressed by the wastewater treatment community as well. Many of our agencies are operating in rural areas, do have the same problems that were expressed by the folks in Calaveras County and other parts of California that are more rural. We're particularly concerned about emergency response capabilities, and many of the conditions that that we're facing are, substantial fire danger in some of these areas, as well as snow conditions and so forth. And so we need to make sure that the exemptions do recognize the need for flexibility and the need to protect the public interest. And I guess it's somewhat promising that there may be some paths forward that don't involve complete replacement of vehicles, but maybe conversions through time. But I think the grid capabilities are certainly a concern, and the need for exemptions is certainly very real. So we ask that the CARB staff pursue the amendments on a rigorous and assertive schedule, and again, keep everything as transparent as possible so that we can maybe fine tune this regulation so it's a little less burdensome for all of the public utilities and the investor-owned utilities that serve the same function to achieve the public ends. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. I think in part, thanks to the conversation with CW a while back, we did identify a good number of the investor-owned investor-owned water utilities fall into the definitions of public agency utilities. So that's a part of the rationale for why we're opening up both the state and local government portion and the high priority fleet portion, because we do see there's a lot of public agencies we're covering with these amendments, but also a number of private agencies such as yours. So we will be looking at that as we go through this rulemaking process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Powers, we can go back to you.
Thank you again. I wanted to follow up on my initial question regarding the 10% requirement for the daily use exemption. I do understand that you're looking to modify the two exemption paths that were highlighted at the beginning of your presentation, which, by the way, if you could provide a link to, just so that we have it, that would be great. I don't know that I saw one in the chat. The 10% requirement, as you stated, is to show that we are making an effort in order to try to comply with the spirit of the ZEV regulation. Now, we do have a fleet that is not just heavy duty and medium duty, but we also have light duty vehicles as well, which will have their own, battery, ZEV vehicles in that as well. That kind of shows if we show that we have zero emission vehicles in our light duty fleet, is that enough perhaps to show that we're interested in it? Because this daily use exemption is about supporting the delivery of potable water in Ventura County for us. And so for us to get a vehicle just to have it, even though we know it won't actually meet the daily requirements of the vehicle, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And so I just would ask that you guys would consider adding that, the possibility of making that change to the daily use exemption to the scope of this effort and this rulemaking effort. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. In terms of light duty vehicles, throughout the regulation and throughout many of our Q&As about the regulation to date, we've been very clear that light duty vehicles and light duty ZEVs are not affected by the regulation and are not counted towards compliance. So except for light duty package delivery vehicles and high priority fleets. So if you had light duty vehicles and say you had a number of Tesla sedans, they would not count towards that 10% requirement, just like they would not count towards the medium and heavy duty ZEV upgrade requirements. I'm not sure if we are looking at expanding the scope of these changes to include looking at the 10% requirement. I'll let Paul answer that.
Thanks, Chris. I guess a couple of things. So first, we sent a link to the presentation in the chat, so everyone should be able to see that. We post all our meeting materials on our meetings and events page. So this one was posted, I think, last Friday. As Chris mentioned, the regulation does have that 10% requirement. That's outside the scope of what the bill calls for. There is other flexibilities within the rule which might help out. If you have a fleet of different types of vehicles, you could focus on some of the potentially easier to electrify vehicles at that 10%, such as pickups or vans. But ultimately, the rule has that 10% there. So if you'd like, we could discuss further with your fleet specifics, set up a follow-up call or something. But I think that's outside the scope of what we're looking at for these amendments.
Fair enough. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I see Mark Roost is on. So you have spoken twice already. So can you just confirm that what you're going to be commenting on is relevant to the AB 1594? Thank you.
Yes, it is relevant. And I've got it written out. Okay, so basically the person talking about the garbage trucks said that the battery was 4 tons. I worked out with that it's probably the lower end of lithium iron phosphate at about 120 watt hours per kilogram, which would give him in 4 tons about 436 kilowatt hours. So a 500 kilowatt hour battery at 1,000 watt hours per kilogram would weigh 500 kilograms. A 500 kilowatt hour battery at 2 kilowatt hours per kilogram would weigh 250 kilograms. And an 800 kilowatt hour battery at 2 kilowatt hours per kilogram, which is in our target range, would weigh only 400 kilograms or about 880 pounds. So I'm hearing in this meeting, I have heard many different issues with the state of new battery electric vehicles and the state of electric supply. And I would just like to reiterate that if we actually got support for developing the technology, we could both create a new industry in California and get these problems resolved so that they are not delaying getting the conversion, getting the removal of the greenhouse gases and the diesel fuels, the soot from the air. Thank you.
Thank you. So our team doesn't work on the incentives component. That's a separate team, but if you'd like, we can get you in touch later if you'd like.
I would. Thank you very much.
Okay. So I'm not seeing any more comments online and not in person either. So we may be able to end this off. So I'll just go again to our next step slide at the end. So again, this is a start of a public process. So we are looking for feedback from all interested parties on some of the things we discussed today. I think what we heard a lot is that the 13-year portion of the regulation, there's a lot of concerns and people looking for solutions on a better metric. I've heard about reliability, hours of operation, some other metrics. A lot of thoughts about having an open and public process. So we'll see. We always do aim to have an open process. We'll see how we can best accommodate that within this rulemaking. And so, yeah, we do appreciate all the feedback from everyone, and we appreciate what we'll see in the future. So thank you all for your time, and we will talk to you again soon. I don't think we have a specific comment. I guess at the end of the April would work, but just whenever you can get stuff to us, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, this is an informal comment period, so we don't actually have any official rulemaking docket or anything like that set up for written comments. So right now, we're just accepting pretty much anything people want to send us in any format. It could be verbal, could be written, anything.
Yeah. I would say don't wait too long. I think we have heard also we want to move quickly on this. So getting information to us sooner will help us in developing a provision or rulemaking that works for everyone. Okay, thank you all.